We're here to investigate the FedEx truck tractor crash that occurred on April 10th, 2014, with a Los Angeles-based high school group and chaperones who were in a motor coach on their way to Humboldt State. Before I go any further, on behalf of all the men and women at the NTSB, I want to extend our deepest condolences to the families and friends of all those who lost their lives or were injured in this tragic accident. And this evening, I'm actually going to talk about three specific areas of actions that have been going on today. Before I begin those three areas, I'm going to outline information from an organizational meeting that happened last night. At that meeting, parties to this investigation were identified. These are individual organizations that can provide technical information to assist the NTSB in collecting technical and factual information for the investigation. Those parties to the investigation include the California Highway Patrol, the California Department of Transportation, or Caltrans, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, FedEx Corporation, as well as Silverado Stages Incorporated. That's the owner-operator of the motor coach that was involved in the crash. So I have three areas that I'm going to review. The first one is we were on scene today, which gave us a chance to actually observe the tire marks, which I'm going to be talking about, as well as specifics of the median. So we had a chance to actually look at that. Second is we had a chance to see the vehicles. This gave us a chance to observe the extent of the fire damage, as well as see potential recoverable data, which we'll be talking about. Photos both from on scene as well as from the vehicles have been tweeted out, but are also available on our website at ntsb.gov. The second area I'm going to talk about is all of the actions that have been taken over the past 24 hours. So we've barely been here 24 hours, but have been quite busy. And so yesterday I reported that we were looking at 6 different areas, that it's actually expanded now to 7 groups and 7 different areas. So I have a lot of information. I'm going to report all the factual pieces that we've basically been able to obtain in just over the last 24 hours. So first, let me start with the highway group. They measured the median. It is 58 feet wide, and that's edge line to edge line, which is if you go out on the highway, that's literally yellow line to yellow line. As we discussed previously, anything over 50 feet wide for median means that barriers are an option. So that's one of the areas we'll be looking at, is the decision-making behind a decision to not have barriers on this particular area of the highway. This is just preliminary information, but our investigators have been able to, in this preliminary way, calculate that the FedEx truck tractor departed at a 10-degree angle from its travel lane onto the median. There's no indication of tire marks from braking in the median or in the northbound lanes. The bus, we were able to actually measure 175 feet of pre-impact tire marks. When you subtract the 30 feet of the bus, that gives us 145 feet of tire marks, including evasive maneuvers. This physical evidence would indicate that the bus was steered to the right. So, our human performance and motor carrier groups. They are organizing a list for Federal Express related to documentation that we need. For example, we'll be looking at extensive information related to the drivers as well as operations. They are arranging a visit to the Los Angeles terminal where the motor coach trip originated. They are also in the process of making arrangements with the Los Angeles Unified School District personnel. We want to interview people to understand how arrangements were made, what the contract was with the motor coach company, to understand the specific parameters of the trip. Our human performance and motor carrier folks will also be interviewing survivors in the Los Angeles area, so they'll be coordinating with the Los Angeles Unified School District for further interviews with survivors. This is especially critical for our survival factors, looking at occupant protection, literally where people were sitting and what happened in their egress from the motor coach. There was a question yesterday about toxicology. And so I can report to you that the California Highway Patrol arranged for us to be able to get a blood sample from both drivers. So that blood sample is available, and we will be sending that to the Civil Aeromedical Institute, or CAMI, which is in Oklahoma City, run by the FAA. There they will test it for alcohol, over-the-counter medications, prescription medications, illegal drugs. And there is the possibility that they may be able to tell us whether or not either of the drivers inhaled smoke. Another new piece of factual information is that there was a driver change. A different driver, there was an original driver in Los Angeles who drove to Sacramento, and then due to hours of service, stopped driving, and then the accident driver took over in Sacramento. Now let me talk about survival factors. This group is documenting the occupant compartment. They're examining all of the emergency exits, and we now know there was one door and multiple windows, and all of those are going to be examined in detail. They are in the process of obtaining all of the dispatch logs from the first responders to this crash. They're obtaining copies of autopsy results. And our survival factors group has determined that some individuals were ejected from the bus. They will be looking at the specific mechanisms of those ejections. As I mentioned yesterday, our most wanted list includes occupant protection. So clearly one of the issues we're going to be looking at is whether or not seatbelts would have made a difference in these folks being ejected from the motor coach. Related to the vehicles, the initial inspection of the mechanical condition of the vehicles has already started. It's extremely difficult due to the fire damage. I do encourage you to look at the photos. It's going to give you a very good understanding of how our investigators are going to be challenged with some of their inspections. Yesterday we talked about technology, and so today we're actually able to see the electronic control module that's on the bus. It survived the crash. It appears to be available for download. The information would be sent for analysis to the NTSB laboratories in our research and engineering departments in Washington, D.C. Part of what we need to do is determine what was actually recorded. And so we'll talk about how new this bus is in just a moment, but what you need to know is the electronic control module has a lot of capability, but at the time of purchase, the owner-operator gets to actually choose how much that control module is going to record. So while it has a lot of capability, we don't actually know what could be on there. The FedEx truck tractor, the electronic control module, ECM, is not available at all. It was destroyed in the fire. However, our investigators do plan to remove the transmission. We might be able to tell the gear that the truck tractor was in, and this could actually give us a speed range that occurred prior to the crash. They'll also be removing the steering box, and by looking at the markings there, we could tell the number of revolutions, which could give us information of how far the wheel was turned and the direction of the wheels at the time of the crash. And just a little bit of specific vehicle information. The bus was a Setra, S-E-T-R-A, 2014. It was put in service in about a month. So it's a very new motor coach, and it had lap shoulder belts. So it had 3-point restraints. There was a question yesterday about what it had. And I hope you look at the photos, because part of our question yesterday was we couldn't tell just because the fire damage what was there. It was equipped with 3-point restraints. The truck tractor was a 2007 Volvo. Our fire origin group is documenting the damage, and in particular is focused on the source of the truck tractor fire. And the 7th group that I didn't mention yesterday is a reconstruction group. And they're in the process of documenting in a 3D manner damage to both vehicles. The third area I wanted to talk about relates to a question that came up yesterday, a vehicle that was towed from the scene. That was a white Altima, and there are 2 pieces of factual information I just wanted to provide at this point. The first is that the white Altima actually passed the bus prior to the crash. So it went from behind the bus to the left side of the bus and had returned to the lane in front of the bus, and then was actually the first vehicle struck by the FedEx truck tractor. It was hit behind the B pillar. What does that mean? That's right behind the driver and in the left side passenger compartment. The second piece of information is that there was an opportunity to interview the driver and passenger in the white Altima. And the passenger didn't report seeing anything. However, the driver did report seeing flames that were coming out from the truck tractor cab prior to the crash as it was coming across the median. So this also highlights our need to hear from anyone else that observed anything related to this crash. So if you haven't already talked to the police or us, I hope that you will call the police and have them send us whatever witness report you can. If not, you can email us directly, witness@ntsb.gov, which would be extremely helpful for us. Let me highlight, this is just factual information. We will not determine a probable cause while we're on scene. We're not going to speculate. We're not going to analyze. And I'm just going to highlight this is our initial factual information. As we determine more information, information related to our next press briefing, you can follow us at our website, ntsb.gov, on Twitter, @ntsb, on Facebook, or be in contact with Keith Holloway, who's the public affairs officer that's here. I'll take a few questions. I would ask you to please give your name and affiliation, and we'll take a few questions now.
Hi, Chris at the Los Angeles Times. Could you just tell us one more time how the truck left the southbound lane? So you're saying they left at like a 10-degree angle and there was no sign of braking before it hit the median?
So the question is a little more information about what happened with the FedEx truck tractor as it left the southbound lanes. And what we can characterize, again, purely factual information, it left those southbound lanes at a 10-degree angle, and there are no tire marks, which would be no braking tire marks, in the median or the northbound lanes. So it left at 10 degrees, and then no tire marks in the median or even after cross the median into the northbound lanes.
From the truck. And
all of this is about the truck.
What about the southbound lanes? Any tire marks in the southbound lanes?
So the question is, are there any tires in the southbound lanes? No. So there are no tire marks. So this is just the truck tractor. It's leaving the southbound lanes at 10 degrees across the median into the northbound lanes. There are no tire marks anywhere.
So you won't offer any analysis on that, though? Does anyone analyze that information? Or, I'm sorry, Tom Wade from CBS Los Angeles.
That's right, and the question is, can we offer any analysis of that? This is a great example if we're just giving you the factual information right now. Because this is a perfect example of, I'm giving you the factual information. This is what we talked about yesterday. That's the what. The big question is the why. There's so many reasons why. That's why we're in about 24 hours. We can't go there yet. No probable cause, no speculation. But this is critical information, right?
Well, that's why I wasn't saying speculation. I was just based on the information. I wasn't sure if you were able. I know you said it before. Ultimately, is this something that you would analyze, though, at the end of this investigation?
And so the question is this something we're going to analyze? Absolutely. And I think we are telling you pretty critical factual information because we did report that the bus driver did move to the right. There was clearly reaction on the part of the bus driver. We can differentiate that from the truck driver, where we see no marks, right? So we're not going to go further than that, but factually, that's pretty critical information. Yes?
Gigi Grassi at Fox 11 News from Los Angeles. Can you expand a little bit on that witness testimony in the Nissan? Can you tell us where the Nissan was in relationship to the bus and where he or she saw those flames coming from? Can you talk a little bit more about the testimony that witness has given you?
So the question really is about the report from the Altima driver and what they were reporting to us. So we know that the Altima had actually completed its passing action and was in front of the bus. I don't know if we know how much further in front of the bus so we don't, those are the kind of things we have to look into, but that's a good question about how far ahead of it was the Altima in front of the bus at the time of the contact. What we do know is that the driver reported seeing flames from underneath the cab as the truck tractor was coming across the median. So that just means that they saw flames coming prior to the crash.
And I'm sorry, when you say the cab, is that where the driver is, or is that the trailer part? I'm sorry.
Nope, thank you. So the truck tractor is where the driver is. And so the FedEx is a truck tractor with two semi-trailers behind it. So the truck tractor is the cab part where the driver is.
And that's where
she saw flames coming out from underneath that. Okay. And just to clarify, this is again why this is factual information is we not only don't know the source of that, or where it originated, right? So we don't know if that was where that started or what role it played. But that's pretty important, again, information to know that we actually have flames being reported prior to the crash.
And a follow-up to that, was she able to tell you, did she see the driver of the FedEx truck and what condition, what was he doing at that time?
So the question is, any other observations about the driver, actions, et cetera, but we don't have any further information about that at this time.
Dr. Rose, Patrick Healy from NBC in LA. Any other witnesses who reported seeing flames, or is it just this woman in the Nissan?
So at this point, this is the primary report of the flames from this particular individuals. This is exactly why I've been asking for other witnesses that might be able to come forth. As more information comes out, this may trigger somebody to realize, oop, I might have seen something that was actually relevant there. But at this point, this is primary. And the question, of course, that's been alluded to here is that's the report from this witness. We need to see if we can find other information that we can discover to see not only where the source is, but where it started.
Lieutenant Nurple with the Associated Press. Is there an investigative way to reconstruct whether or not the truck was on fire before the crash?
So the question is whether we can reconstruct whether the cab was on fire before the crash, and that's exactly what we're going to be looking at. And so one of the questions is not just the source, but when that started. So we're going to want to know, could that have started in southbound lanes, crossing the median, northbound lanes? That's obviously critical information for us to understand.
How would you go about determining if it was on fire before the crash with the state of the truck now?
So the question is how we'd actually determine that given the state of the truck. Well, one would be witnesses, and there may be ways to track the fire damage. We have one of our fire specialists from our research and engineering department at the NTSB, and he's already kind of looking specifically at how much fuel were in what tanks and where they could have hit, and this is where on-scene information is critical, because there could be physical evidence actually of fire, smoke, etc. somewhere, either on the ground, or again, we're going to be looking at things like our blood samples. Yes?
Kevin Wing, ABC News. You were speaking a bit ago about seat belts. Were there seat belts equipped on this motor coach?
Yes, this was a 2014 Setra, barely a month into service, and it actually had lap shoulder belts. So these are 3-point restraints.
The people that are ejected from the bus, can you say how many were ejected? Were these some of the fatalities, and where were they ejected from the bus?
So the question is about the individuals who were ejected from the bus, and we don't have a lot more information at this time. What I'm highlighting is we do have information that these folks were ejected. That's really important for us to look at, because the question from a survival factor standpoint is clearly whether or not the ejection was involved in their survival. And so that's where things like the lap shoulder belts could be really important. We're going to look at whether seat belts might have kept them in their place if that would have made a difference in the survivability of this accident. Those are the kinds of things we're looking at. At this point, we don't have any more information.
And the people ejected were all fatally ejected?
The question is whether the people who were ejected were part of the folks who lost their lives, and yes, they were.
Let's take 2 more questions, please.
On the floor back there, yeah?
Los Angeles News Group. Is there any indication, either from the witnesses or from your examination, how long or the time that elapsed between the FedEx truck leaving the roadway and when it struck the Altima and the bus?
So the question is the time that it took to leave the southbound lanes to actually hit the Altima and then the bus. That's being calculated right now. I can tell you that today our highway investigator was already starting to do those calculations. They're too preliminary to tell you right now that we have a number. But by looking at that's why the departure angle and any of the tire marks we see will allow us to calculate that. And that's a pretty important number for 2 reasons. It tells us how much time the driver might have had to make any kind of evasive maneuvers. And of course, pairing that with the tire marks and other information from the bus driver tells us how much information that driver would have had, time-wise, to react to anything that they saw.
Doctor, will the blood sample enable you to determine if the driver of the FedEx had somehow become incapacitated, had suffered a heart attack or a stroke or something of that nature?
I'm going to answer this, and then we're going to go back if you still have yours as the last one.
I do.
Is that okay?
Oh, forget
Give me,
that.
that's all right. Nope, that's all right. But I'm going to give you the last one since we did that. Repeat it so we can all.
Well, whether the blood sample or other evidence will enable you to determine if the driver of the FedEx suffered a heart attack, a stroke, or something else that incapacitated him.
So the question is whether the blood samples that we have available to us might be able to inform us about any medical condition that might have played a role in the driver's state at the time of the crash. And yes, that's part of what we'll be looking at. So one of the things is, besides all the medications, drugs, et cetera, that we can look for, there are things related to hemoglobin, which could tell us whether or not smoke was inhaled. That could give us some information about what might have affected the driver at the time of the crash. Last question.
Thank you. The 175 feet of pre-collision skid marks from the bus, can we say that it's actually braking and he's maneuvering to the right to avoid a collision?
So it's 175 feet, minus 30 feet for the bus, so we've got 145 feet of pre-impact crash. I don't know if we're at a point to say it was all braking.
It would have been breaking.
Yes, right, there's nothing else at this. So really the two things we're saying is that indicates there was an action on the part of the driver to stop the vehicle, and we're also saying that there's a reaction beyond just the braking to swerving to the right. So there was clearly a move to go to the right. So that driver was clearly reacting to a situation, both braking and a driving maneuver. Thank you very much. Please be in contact with Keith or Track for a briefing tomorrow. Thanks very much.